Welcome, deep divers. Today we're heading out, metaphorically speaking, into that vast, silent New Mexico desert. You know the place, right? Where the sky just goes on forever and the land itself feels like it holds secrets. We're talking about a July night, way back in 1947, an ordinary night, or so it seemed, in a little town called Roswell. But it became the night where, well, the ordinary collided head-on with the extraordinary, and the world, pretty much unaware, was about to hold its breath. This story, though, it's not straightforward, is it? It's got this dual thing going on. First, an official announcement that just electrified everyone. Then, almost instantly, a complete U-turn, a baffling retraction. And that really set the stage for, well, decades of theories, debates.
Absolutely. And you really need to understand the historical vibe back then. It's crucial. We were literally just stepping out of the shadow of World War II, a huge world-changing conflict,
Yeah.
and stepping right into the dawn of the Cold War. The whole global chessboard was shifting. Government secrecy, that was becoming like the name of the game. Controlling information was vital. The U.S. was super focused on the Soviets. Any tech advantage, any intelligence edge was paramount.
And the public imagination was already kind of primed, wasn't it?
Oh, totally. Just weeks before Roswell, you had Kenneth Arnold's sighting near Mount Rainier. He saw these 9 shiny crescent things flying incredibly fast, skipping like saucers on water, and boom, the term flying saucer was born. It was in the news. People were talking. So this idea of unknown things in the sky, it was already buzzing around. That made the Roswell news even more explosive when it hit.
That context really is everything. It helps to make sense of the reaction. And that's exactly why we're diving deep today.
Yeah.
Our mission here isn't just to rehash the headlines, balloons versus aliens. We want to really unpack the Roswell incident, using the sources, looking at everything. We'll dig into what happened on that ranch initially, trace how the conspiracy theories grew, really scrutinize the official explanations, and maybe try to figure out why this story still grabs us, why it still echoes after all this time. We're not taking sides here, not trying to prove anything, just laying out the layers of this really fascinating enigma for you so you can see all the angles. All right, let's get into it. It all starts, like a lot of good mysteries, with a man of the land, W. Mac Brazel, a rancher, grounded, practical, worked a huge Foster ranch out there in the middle of nowhere, really.
Miles and miles of just New Mexico wilderness.
Exactly. So early July 47, a massive storm blows in, thunder, lightning, the whole deal. Max hunkered down in his ranch house, and then through the storm's noise, he hears this sound.
Not thunder, though.
No, he described it as a colossal echoing explosion, something different, deeper, a tearing sound almost. He even felt a vibration, like a low hum that lingered.
Weird.
Yeah. But being a practical guy, he initially just shrugs it off. Maybe lightning hit weird, maybe distant military stuff. Who knows?
But the next morning changes things.
Right. He rides out to check his sheep, and the familiar landscape looks wrong. Instead of just sagebrush, there's this shimmer. Something unnatural scattered over a huge area.
Not just trash someone dumped.
No way. Two were vote for that, and this stuff.
Huh.
Well, he gets closer, gets off his horse, picks up a piece, and immediately he knows. This isn't like anything he's ever seen before.
And this is where it gets really strange, the properties of the material itself.
Totally. He described it as thin as foil, like paper thin. But incredibly strong, he tries to crumple it. It just springs right back. Smooth, no crease.
Wow.
Tries to tear it, can't. It felt metallic, but almost weightless, like it didn't have the right heft for metal.
And there was more than just the foil-like stuff, right?
Yeah, he found pieces that looked like balsa wood. Super light, but really stiff and rigid. They were sort of interwoven with metallic strips.
Okay, still maybe explainable as some kind of experimental material, perhaps?
Maybe. But then there were the symbols. That's the kicker. Strange, purplish pink symbols on some of the pieces. He said they were like hieroglyphics.
Hieroglyphics.
Yeah, not English, not Spanish, not any local Native American symbols he knew, just alien. That was his feeling, profoundly alien.
And the sheer amount of it.
Astonishing. He spent days riding around, figuring out the scale. It stretched for like 3/4 of a mile.
A huge debris field.
Huge. And he tried everything. Tried to burn a piece, wouldn't catch fire. Hit it with a hammer, wouldn't dent, wouldn't break.
Okay, that's definitely not normal wreckage.
Not at all. So Mac, even just a regular rancher, knew this wasn't any plane he'd ever heard of. Not a weather balloon. Nothing ordinary.
And with Kenneth Arnold's flying saucer story fresh in everyone's minds.
Exactly. That probably pushed him over the edge. He realized maybe, just maybe, this was one of those things he knew he had to tell someone.
So a few days later, July 7th, he makes the decision.
Yep, loads up his truck with some of this weird debris and makes the long drive into Roswell. Goes straight to the sheriff, George Wilcox.
And Wilcox must have been stunned.
Utterly confounded is how it's described. He handles the material, sees the symbols. He knows instantly this is way above his pay grade.
So he makes the call.
The crucial call to Roswell Army Airfield, RAAF.
And that call gets routed to Major Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer for the 5 and 9th Bomb Group.
Which is a huge deal. People need to grasp this. The 509th wasn't just any unit.
No, this was the only atomic bomb group in the world at that time. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That was them. Top security, top priority.
And Marcel himself.
Oh.
Highly respected. Sharp guy, veteran, meticulous. Knew his stuff when it came to wreckage intelligence.
So he's intrigued, maybe a bit skeptical initially, sends another officer, Sheridan Cabot, out first, then goes himself.
And when Marcel sees the debris field, his skepticism vanishes pretty fast.
Yeah, he was an expert in identifying downed aircraft, foreign tech. He apparently knew, almost on sight, this was not conventional.
He called it truly anomalous, unlike anything he'd ever encountered.
He spends hours there, right, carefully collecting samples.
Meticulously.
Mm-hmm.
Confirms everything Brazel said about the properties, loads it into a staff car, then onto a B-29 bomber.
Destination Fort Worth, Texas, for analysis.
Exactly. And Marcel later said his mind was just reeling. He felt like he was holding history, something that would change everything.
And then the next day, July 8th, things explode globally.
Oh, yeah. The RAAF Public Information Officer, Walter Haut, issues an official press release, and this is key. It was approved by the base commander, Colonel William Blanchard.
This wasn't some low-level mistake.
No way. And the wording, it was unambiguous. Quote, "The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence office of the 509th Bomb Group was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc."
The flying object landed on a ranch near Roswell sometime last week. Just like that. Flat-out statement.
The reaction was instantaneous, global. Flying disc recovered, banner headlines everywhere.
And crucially, this wasn't speculation. This was the U.S. military, the atomic bomb guys, saying they had one.
People's imaginations went wild. Silver discs, alien tech. The world was buzzing. It felt like a pivotal moment for humanity.
A collective gasp, waiting for the next shoe to drop.
But it dropped in a way nobody expected. And incredibly fast.
Less than 24 hours later, it's almost dizzying how quickly it changed.
General Roger Ramey, commander of the 8th Air Force in Fort Worth, calls a press conference. Hasty. Almost staged.
And what does he show the cameras? Not the weird stuff Marcel collected?
No, he's holding fragments of a regular beat-up weather balloon and a radar reflector. Mundane stuff.
And poor Jesse Marcel is there too, right? Looking incredibly awkward.
Yeah, photographed holding this balloon junk. His face, his posture just screams discomfort, like he's being forced to play along.
And Ramey declares the whole flying disc thing was just a mistake.
A mistake. So the Roswell guys got overexcited. It was merely a high-altitude weather balloon. Maybe a secret one, but just a balloon.
And the media, they just went with it.
Pretty much. Confused, maybe, but the official word from a general trumped the initial release. Headlines changed from flying disc to balloon mistake.
Which just raises that immediate question for you listening now. How could the story flip so completely so fast? What does that tell you about information control back then?
Especially in that Cold War climate.
Exactly. And just like that, officially, the Roswell incident was over. Case closed. Or so they thought.
Yeah, for almost 30 years, that explanation basically held. Roswell faded, became a footnote, a bit of wartime weirdness, a mistake quickly corrected.
Just a story for the UFO buffs, mostly dismissed by the mainstream.
But secrets, especially big ones, tend not to stay buried forever, do they?
They have a way of bubbling up, like something pushing through the cracks.
And the first major crack appeared in the late 1970s. It wasn't a leak, not some big government report.
No, it started with a conversation. A voice from the past.
Major Jesse Marcel, retired by then, living quietly, and crucially, no longer under military orders.
He sought out Stanton Friedman, a well-known UFO researcher, and he talked.
And what he said was basically a bombshell. After decades of silence, he stated, flat out, it was not of this earth.
Wow. After all that time.
Yeah. He went into detail about the pressure, the orders to go along with the weather balloon story, said it was a total cover-up.
And he stood by his original assessment of the material.
Absolutely. Insisted it was like nothing human-made. The foil that wouldn't crease, the rigid light struts, those weird symbols.
The stuff at Ramey's press conference.
A substitute. A fake. Marcel confessed he was forced to pose with it, part of the deception. Said it haunted him.
Marcel's testimony really opened the floodgates, didn't it?
Completely. It emboldened others. People who were there in 47, military personnel, civilians who had stayed quiet for decades, started cautiously coming forward.
And their story is added. Well, a much darker, more complex layer.
Yeah, it wasn't just about debris anymore. These new accounts, pieced together, started talking about not one crash site, but two.
Two sites.
That's what they claimed. Brazel's ranch was the debris field, yes. But miles away, maybe closer to the plains of San Agustin, there was supposedly another site.
And at that site...
Not just debris, an intact craft, disc-shaped, partially buried in the ground, and occupants.
Okay, now we're getting into the really sensational stuff, the bodies.
Exactly. And what's striking, or perhaps suspicious depending on your view, is how consistent the descriptions were from different people.
What were they describing?
Small beings, like 3.5 to 5 feet tall. Slender, frail bodies.
And the heads?
Large, elongated heads, out of proportion. Big, dark, almond-shaped eyes, often described as completely black. No pupils. Really unsettling.
Animal features otherwise.
Yeah. Small mouths, sometimes no visible nose or ears. Skin was often described as grayish or pale, and hands with usually 4 long, thin fingers.
This is basically the blueprint for the gray alien image, isn't it?
Pretty much. This is where that iconic image seems to crystallize in the public mind, tied directly to these Roswell accounts.
And there was that story from the local mortician, too, Glenn Dennis.
Right. Very controversial, but a key part of the narrative. Dennis claimed the RAAF called him asking about child-sized coffins.
Child-sized? Oof.
And asking about preserving bodies that had been exposed to the elements. He also claimed he saw small, covered bodies on gurneys at the base hospital and was later threatened by military police to keep quiet.
Which feeds directly into the cover-up narrative, if true.
If true. The implication was chilling. They weren't just hiding wreckage, they were hiding bodies, alien bodies, and would stop at nothing to maintain secrecy.
And the alleged military response described by witnesses certainly fits that picture. Total clampdown.
Immediate and overwhelming. Roads blocked. Sites scoured meticulously. Like every tiny fragment picked up, ground scraped clean almost.
Erasing all traces.
That seemed to be the goal. Then reports of strange cargo being moved out under heavy guard late at night, trucks heading for, well, who knows for sure.
Rumors pointed to places like Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, known for analyzing foreign tech.
Or maybe even Area 51 eventually, though that wasn't really a known entity back then.
But strategically, during the Cold War, finding something like this, an unknown craft, potentially hostile beings.
The secrecy would be absolute, wouldn't it? Maximum priority.
Unquestionably. Any potential technological gain or understanding a potential threat would demand total secrecy.
Which brings us to the big question. If this was real, why the extreme secrecy? Why the massive cover-up?
Well, the theories put forward by proponents are pretty logical from a certain point of view. First, there's mass panic.
The idea that revealing intelligent alien life exists and crashed here could cause global chaos, shatter religions, societies.
Potentially. Governments might fear losing control if people panic. Easier to just deny it.
Then there's the technology angle.
Huge. Imagine getting your hands on tech light years ahead of yours. Flight systems, energy sources.
Especially during the Cold War arms race with the Soviets.
Exactly. You wouldn't share that. You'd study it in secret, try to reverse engineer it, gain an insurmountable advantage. Secrecy is key.
And just plain old national security, right?
Yeah.
An unknown entity. Potentially hostile.
You have to contain it, understand it. Information control is paramount until you know what you're dealing with.
And maybe just the desire to control the narrative itself, something this reality-altering.
Right. The government might feel it has to manage how this information comes out, if ever, to prevent societal breakdown. Controlling the story is controlling the situation.
This all leads into, perhaps, the most infamous part of the conspiracy lore. The Majestic 12 documents.
Oh, yes, MJ-12. These documents mysteriously surfaced in the mid-'80s. Purported top-secret memos.
What did they claim?
They claimed President Truman set up a super-secret committee, MJ-12, right after Roswell in '47. Top scientists, military brass, intelligence chiefs.
Tasked with what?
Handling everything Roswell. Recovering the craft and bodies, studying the tech, and running the public deception. The whole cover-up operation, essentially.
Now, we have to be clear here. These documents are widely considered fakes, right? By historians, government agencies.
Overwhelmingly, yes. There are issues with historical accuracy, formatting, signatures, provenance. Lots of red flags suggesting forgery.
But despite that, they became huge in the UFO community.
Absolutely, because whether real or fake, They provided something powerful, a framework, a believable structure for the cover-up.
It gave names, dates, a chain of command, made the conspiracy feel organized.
Tangible?
Precisely. MJ-12 became the blueprint for the ultimate cosmic secret, the secret government hiding the truth. It filled the narrative vacuum left by official silence.
So even if they're forged, they played a massive role in shaping the Roswell myth as we know it today. No doubt. It took Roswell from a confusing incident to a full-blown, structured conspiracy narrative. The story just kept getting bigger.
Okay, so with all this swirling Marcel's testimony, the body stories, MJ-12, the pressure on the government just kept building through the 80s and early 90s.
Yeah, the official silence wasn't really cutting it anymore. People wanted answers.
So finally, in the mid-90s, the U.S. Air Force decided to address it head-on. They released two big reports.
Trying to put the whole thing to bed once and for all.
The first one came out in 1994. The Roswell Report, Fact versus Fiction in the New Mexico Desert.
And its conclusion was pretty direct.
Very direct. They stated unequivocally that the debris Mac Brazel and Jesse Marcel found was from Project Mogul.
Project Mogul. Okay, what was that?
A real, highly classified Army Air Forces program from 1947. Its goal was top secret. Use high-altitude balloon trains carrying sensitive microphones to try and detect sound waves from Soviet nuclear tests.
So espionage balloons, basically. High-tech ones.
Exactly. These weren't simple weather balloons. They were huge arrays, multiple balloons, complex instruments, and crucially, large radar reflectors.
Radar reflectors. Made of what?
Lightweight stuff. Balsa wood sticks, foil-like material for reflecting radar signals, sometimes held together with tape.
Ah, so the Air Force argument was that the weird properties Marcel described
Were actually consistent with Mogul components. The strong, thin foil, radar reflector material, the balsa-like struts, part of the reflector frame.
and the strange symbols.
They identified those as patterns on adhesive tape used on some Mogul reflectors. Apparently, one manufacturer used tape with sort of floral or geometric patterns, purplish, pinkish sometimes.
Okay, so that explanation covers the debris pretty thoroughly. And the secrecy.
Explained by Mogul's classified nature, it was vital Cold War intelligence gathering. They had to cover it up, initially using this simple weather balloon story to protect the real secret project. It wasn't about aliens, it was about protecting Mogul.
Makes a certain kind of logical sense decades later.
It does. But the 94 report didn't really touch the body stories, did it?
No, that was a big omission, and critics jumped on it. If you're closing the case, you have to address the bodies.
So in 1997, they released a follow-up, the Roswell Report. Case closed. This one tackled the bodies directly.
And their explanation for the alleged alien bodies?
Primarily, they pointed to anthropomorphic crash test dummies.
Crash test dummies, like the ones used in CART tests.
Similar idea, but these were used in high-altitude military experiments in the 1950s. Dropped from planes to test parachutes, ejection seats, things like Project High Dive.
And these dummies, after falling from miles up,
Could be pretty banged up, damaged, maybe look small or oddly proportioned. The Air Force argued that witnesses, seeing these recovered dummies from secret tests years after 1947, misremembered or conflated them with the Roswell incident.
conflated them. How does that work?
They called it memory consolidation. The idea that over decades, distinct memories can blur, especially if they're unusual or traumatic. So seeing a weird dummy in the 50s might get mentally merged with the 47 balloon story, creating a false memory of seeing bodies in 47.
Memory consolidation. It's a real psychological phenomenon.
They also suggested a secondary explanation. Actual military plane crashes in the area in the 40s and 50s. Tragic accidents with real, sometimes disfigured, human casualties. Those events, too, could have gotten mixed up in people's memories with the 47 incident over time.
So mobile balloons for the debris and crash dummies or real crash victims plus memory distortion for the bodies. That's the official case closed explanation.
That's the official story, but for a lot of people, it didn't close the case at all. Doubts lingered, big time.
Why didn't these reports satisfy everyone? What were the main counter-arguments?
Well, first, the timing. Why did the Mogul explanation take nearly 50 years to come out? Critics said it was just too convenient. If it was Mogul, why not say so earlier, even just vaguely referring to a classified project? Why the decades of silence?
The delay itself bred suspicion.
Exactly. And then there's Jesse Marcel, his unwavering conviction. Here's this highly trained intelligence officer swearing it wasn't a balloon, wasn't anything earthly. How could he be so wrong? Believers trust his expertise over the later explanation.
The timeline on the dummies is also a big issue, right?
Huge. Most of those high-altitude dummy tests happened in the 1950s, after 1947. So how do dummies explain body sightings reported in 1947?
That's where the memory consolidation argument comes in, but it feels like a stretch to many.
It does. It seems like trying to fit the explanation to the accounts rather than the other way around. Critics say it dismisses specific, consistent testimony from 47.
And what about the consistency of the body descriptions themselves, even if details vary?
Proponents point to the core consistency. Small bodies, big heads, large dark eyes. Repeated by multiple, sometimes credible, witnesses. Could they all be mistaken or lying or confabulating in the exact same way? Seems unlikely to believers.
So for many, the government's changing stories, flying disc, then weather balloon, then silence, then mogul balloon, then crash dummies, that whole sequence itself looks like evidence of a cover-up.
Right. The very need to keep explaining it away with increasingly complex stories just reinforces the belief that the simplest explanation, a crashed alien craft, was being deliberately obscured from the start.
So whatever you believe happened, you can see how the government's handling of it basically guaranteed skepticism would fester.
It created the perfect storm for conspiracy theories to thrive. The official reports might say case closed, but for millions the questions are louder than ever. It's a classic example of how official secrecy can backfire. So why? Why does Roswell still hold such power over us after all this time, all these debates?
Well, at its heart, I think it taps into one of the biggest questions humanity has ever asked. Are we alone?
That fundamental cosmic question.
Exactly. You look up at the night sky, all those stars, the sheer scale of the universe. It's almost impossible not to wonder.
And Roswell feels like maybe, just maybe, we got a glimpse of the answer.
For many, yes. It represents that moment where the answer seemed to be a no, you are not alone. It challenges our whole perspective, makes us think maybe we're just a small part of a much bigger cosmic neighborhood.
It also plays into our natural skepticism of authority, doesn't it?
Okay.
Especially secret government stuff.
Oh, absolutely. The Cold War was peak government secrecy. Hidden projects, paranoia. It was the perfect environment for distrust to grow.
And that initial flip-flop by the military. Flying disc one day, weather balloon the next.
That sowed the seeds right there. If they lie about that, what else were they hiding? It feeds this ongoing narrative of hidden truths, secret knowledge kept from the public. And you see that distrust echo today, right?
Definitely. And Roswell has moved beyond just an incident. It's become a cultural touchstone, a modern myth.
Totally. Think about the movies, the books, the TV shows, Independence Day, The X-Files. Roswell's often referenced implicitly or explicitly.
And that image of the gray alien, largely born from the Roswell witness descriptions. It's the default alien image now.
And Roswell, the town. It's embraced it completely. UFO, capital, museums, festivals. It's built an identity around the mystery.
It shows how a story, whether fact or fiction, can take on a life of its own, become incredibly influential.
It's a testament to the power of narrative. Our need to make sense of the unexplained, maybe our desire for something extraordinary.
Yeah, I don't think the fascination is just about believing in aliens, necessarily.
No, it's deeper. It's about the human drive to explore, to understand, to push boundaries, the allure of the unknown.
That sense that maybe there's something more out there beyond what we currently grasp.
Right. So whether it was aliens or a secret balloon, Roswell taps into that fundamental curiosity. It remains the symbol of the unexplained, that frontier just beyond our reach.
So we've traced the path. From Mac Breezel's strange discovery to the military's shocking announcement and even quicker retraction.
Through decades of silence, then the emergence of witness testimony about wreckage, bodies, and a cover-up.
And finally, the official explanations. Project Mogul, crash dummies, memory consolidation that aimed to close the book.
But for many, those explanations just raised more questions, didn't they?
They really did. Which leads us to the unavoidable question, I suppose.
Will we ever really know? With absolute, undeniable proof.
Given how much time has passed, memories fading, evidence potentially lost or obscured, it seems unlikely we'll get a single answer that satisfies everyone, doesn't it?
Probably not. The fog of time is pretty thick on this one.
Perhaps not definitively. But the search for answers, that human urge to solve mysteries, to understand the unexplained, that's not going away. Roswell is proof of how powerful a compelling story can be. A story that touches our deepest hopes, maybe our deepest fears, too.
It challenges our place in the universe.
Exactly. And it reminds you, doesn't it, that sometimes the most ordinary-seeming places can hide the most extraordinary secrets, and that official stories don't always quiet the questions. So as those winds keep blowing across the New Mexico plains, they carry those unresolved questions, the conflicting stories, the enduring belief held by many that something incredible happened back in July 1947. The whisper of Roswell continues. A timeless mystery, always inviting all of us to keep looking up, keep wondering, what else is out there?